All right, it's Willie and Dibby, sponsored by Fremont Bank, full-service banking, no compromises. And
Not
also,
one.
a reminder that is brought to you by BMW Fairfield, now open in the Fairfield Auto Mall. They provide a luxurious, all-encompassing experience to address all your BMW needs. Visit BMWFairfield.com today to book your visit, BMWFairfield.com. Wouldn't you love to have just, it's the classic fly-on-the-wall thing. I have to imagine the Garoppolo story in the offseason twisted and turned at least 5 to 7 times. No?
At least, yeah.
Where was he going to go? The shoulder surgery that started it.
Started with the see ya.
Yeah,
okay,
well,
he's gone.
right.
And then shoulder surgery.
Yeah.
Okay, now we have to wait. And he's on the block.
See
What
ya.
will they get? There was 2 second-rounders for him. Turns out there wasn't. Maybe there was. Is he healthy? Now he's back. You don't get the playbook. You're on the sideline. Go ahead and throw. You don't get to play. He's still going to be gone. Maybe he'll be cut. He's going to Seattle. They're going to keep him? And now he's playing? What the hell is going on around here?
He's leaving. He's staying. He's gone. He's here. And one man knows, knows more than you do. And his name is Nick Wagoner of ESPN, and he joins us now to tell the story of Jimmy this offseason. Hey, Nick. How you doing, man?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
We are fantastic. We're putting together the
Great.
documentary, The Summer of Jimmy, and you are going to be the showrunner, okay? Like, we got to know, man. Like, I know, after looking at the article, so he was almost a Washington Commander. How many different times did the 49ers think he was gone?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, guys, because this is one of those situations that a lot of times people in our business, you know what's going on, but you can't always say it, and you don't know if you're ever going to get to say it. You don't know if you're ever going to get to put it out there, but the series of events that led to this kind of created that opportunity, and on the record, even at the time, John Lynch kind of talked openly at the owners' meetings back in March that, hey, there were some teams that were interested in Jimmy Garoppolo before the shoulder surgery at the combine. They'd had those conversations. But I had heard back then very reliably that one of those teams was the Washington Commanders. And I think the Niners, even today, if you ask people in that building who knew what was going on at the time, before the shoulder surgery, what was going on, if he hadn't had that surgery, what would have happened? That he would be a Washington Commander right now and Carson Wentz wouldn't be. So that's just one of the examples. In terms of some of the other stuff that happened, really after the shoulder surgery, it went very quiet. There was not a lot of interest, and I think the Niners hoped that interest would rekindle when training camp happened once Garoppolo started throwing again. And I can tell you that the Cleveland Browns are a team, a lot of people talked about that, and the Niners were closely keeping an eye on that Brown situation as a potential trade spot. People in Garoppolo's camp felt like that in the summertime, in camp time, was where he was going to end up. Now, that didn't necessarily mean by trade, but one way or the other, if he were to be released, that was a team that was super high on his list that was going to be a real possibility. So there really weren't a ton of different twists and turns in that interim between when the shoulder surgery happened and when he came back in the summer. But I think what ultimately led to was you reach mid-August, when the Niners first kind of started talking about trying to bring him back at a lesser rate, that at that point, Garoppolo's camp realized, hey, most of these teams that are interested are going to wait and see it if he gets released. Then they'll make a move on Jimmy Garoppolo.
So he doesn't get released, and now he stays, and he's the backup. And, well, now he's not the backup anymore, and he's going to be the starter because Trey Lance is out. But how much of a residual hard feeling is there from Jimmy Garoppolo and his camp as it pertains to, and I hate to say this, but the long-term future of Jimmy G as a Niner?
Yeah, I don't think much, honestly. And one of the things that you kind of uncover in reporting a story like this is that his camp was really respectful and appreciated how the 49ers conducted themselves throughout all of this. The story mentions that there was a little bit of just a small amount of friction, in terms of getting the shoulder surgery, and maybe that they could have waited that and played that out. But they're on Garoppolo's side, their mission is to make sure that he's as healthy as he could be. And from what I was told, he was actually dealing with some shoulder stuff long before even the Dallas game and what happened. Now, that obviously brought that forth and made that a bigger issue than it previously was, but he just hadn't been fully healthy in a while, so they wanted to make sure that when he came back, he would be the most marketable commodity that they could have, which is a healthy starting quarterback in the NFL. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of carryover in that. And honestly, there's really no reason for their camp to be mad because Jimmy Garoppolo has agency over everything now. He has the no trade clause. He has the no tag clause. So if he goes out there and plays really well, I think he understands it's incumbent on him to do that, to stay healthy, which is a huge question mark. But if he can do that, then his value will climb back up, and then he will have full say in where he plays in 2023.
Nick Wagoner, ESPN. The article's fantastic, taking us through and answering at least some of the questions of what happened this offseason with Jimmy Garoppolo that led us to this point. Joining us right here on Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. So I think you're kind of leading us somewhere that, and this is something I wanted to get to, which is the current relationship, not just with Jimmy, his team, and the 49er organization, Jimmy and Kyle. As Steve Young put it yesterday, Kyle fired Jimmy from this job, and now he's back doing the job again. Where is that relationship both now for this season and any potential for the future?
You know, if there's any issue there, I don't know about it. Jimmy Garoppolo is a pretty unique guy. He is very kind of casual and laid back, and I think some people mistake that for not caring, but he doesn't really have the ego that you would maybe expect for a starting quarterback in the NFL. And I think once he came to grips, and obviously he's a human being, so he felt some kind of way last year when the Niners traded up for Trey Lance, but he pretty much knew from the get-go that the plan was going to be play this season, meaning last year, and then they were going to turn it over to Trey Lance. And so I don't think that relationship is frayed. I think Kyle Shanahan was pretty direct with him all the way through this, and I think Jimmy Garoppolo appreciates that. And Jimmy Garoppolo was surprised to come back here. Even after the Niners first broached the idea of him coming back at a lesser rate, Jimmy Garoppolo didn't think he was going to be back. But when he sat back and assessed what the options were, let's say he did go to Cleveland. Yes, the scheme is similar, but that's new surroundings, new players, even new scheme, new verbiage, all that stuff to learn versus stay here and if you play, you have the opportunity because you know what you can do in this offense. That's going to be best for your value. And if you don't play, maybe you can bolster your value that way, like we saw a guy like Mitch Trubisky do last year. Just simply by not playing, he was able to kind of regain some value that way. So I think he knows that this is the best situation for him. I think he also understands that Kyle Shanahan, as a schematic coach, can put him in the best position to succeed, and I think he's on board with that.
Is the market for Jimmy G better staying with San Francisco than it is on the open market, considering what the draft class of quarterbacks is expected to be this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that the market spoke loudly this year, and yes, we know that the shoulder was a big part of that, but there weren't teams even after he came back, or that were interested in him or that wanted to make. I mean, John Lynch has said on the record that they did not receive an offer, and they didn't really even get any calls in training camp after Jimmy Garoppolo got healthy. And so I think certainly that he's in a position here where at least you know what you're going to get. And if he can stay healthy, and guys, I just go back to this all the time. I'm not sitting here saying that health is the only reason the Niners wanted to move Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, they felt like he couldn't get them over the hump when he was healthy, but it was the primary reason. And so now you're in this position where you need him to stay healthy to get you through the season, and he needs to stay healthy to get himself to another contract. So it could be a mutually beneficial thing in that way if he could do that. But again, that's a big if.
Nick, we can see on the field, and we've heard for years how his teammates feel about him. The celebration after the touchdown felt like, obvious with what he's been through and how he's handled it. But I wonder what your perspective is on what many have reported, which is that privately, a lot of the players on this team now believe they've got a better chance to win because he's in there. Do you concur with that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, guys, I feel like that's a little bit of common sense, right? It's not like if this is just a guy who has been the starter and they've been an 8-8 team or 9-8 team with him. Like, there's a lot of guys in that locker room that have been to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, and there's a lot of guys in that locker room that were in an NFC Championship game, 8 months ago with Jimmy Garoppolo. So, of course, they're gonna, and we talk about it. We just don't have it from the same perspective of. You know what you're getting with Jimmy Garoppolo. And that can be a good thing because of what I just mentioned, the places that they've gone. And it could be a bad thing because of the reasons that we know the Niners wanted to move on from him, injuries, the bad interceptions, the bad decisions, some of those types of things that have plagued him. But there's something to be said for understanding what your floor is. And yes, maybe the ceiling isn't as high as you would like it to be, but at least you know that the floor is not going to fall out from underneath you.
From a large perspective, should Kyle Shanahan be criticized for his usage of Trey Lance, or is that just people looking to find a scapegoat for the injury?
Look, I think it's one of those things that's an emotional issue that people are going to feel some kind of way about. For me, the conversation shouldn't be about using Trey Lance in the run game, because the Niners should definitely use Trey Lance in the run game. I think you should be talking about the amount in which he was used in the run game. I know a lot of people take umbrage with the fact that they run QB power with him. Well, if you watch his tape from North Dakota State, he had a lot of success doing that. And if you bring Trey Lance into the league and you're saying your goal, and people talk about developing Trey Lance, right? If your goal is to turn Trey Lance into the most maximized version of what Trey Lance can be, and you take running off of the table for him and the designed runs off of the table for him, you're automatically taking away his chance to be the best player that he can be based on what his skill set is. And so for me, I think you can have a conversation of, okay, you're going to have to build in, and you can't predict this, of course, guys, but you're going to know that Trey Lance is probably going to scramble 3 or 4 times a game at least. So there's 3 or 4 there. Then you maybe throw in other 3 or 4 design runs, and you do it in certain situations where it makes sense. And if you want to have the conversation of, yeah, they should be doing that, but they were doing this, and this meaning running him a dozen times a game, I think that's a fair conversation to have. I think that there's certainly culpability on Kyle Shanahan's side in terms of the amount that they're running him. But I disagree with the concept of they shouldn't be running him at all because they need to protect him, because this is a different quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. If you wanted a pocket quarterback, they would have drafted Mac Jones, quite frankly, and people would be very upset about that also. So that's kind of where I fall on that. I think there's a discussion to be had about the amount of usage with Trey Lance in the run game, but actually using him in the run game, I don't fault the 49ers for at all.
Nick Wagoner, ESPN. The article's great stuff. By the way, real quick, I don't know what the scenario is, but is there one in your mind where Garoppolo's on this team after this year?
It's such a good question, Mark. Let me put it this way: if they go deep into the playoffs and or make the Super Bowl, I think that's a conversation that has to be had, because the worst part of the Trey Lance injury is that you're going to be 3 years into this and don't know what you have, and you're still going to have a roster that surrounds him full of guys that are expecting to win. So I can't rule it out. If Jimmy Garoppolo is able to stay healthy and plays really well, there's a real chance that he's going to be the best available quarterback in the offseason, and you would think the 49ers would want to make sure they're insulated once again.
Nick, oh my gosh. But can't disagree. Hey, man, great to have you. Thank you so much.
You got it, guys. Take care.
All right, there he goes. That's Nick Wagoner, ESPN.